Mooney's in my class this semester. We talked about hypertext on Friday.
So many are early. Sorry, guys, I was trying not to be too early to have dead air, but there is no dead air. Hi, everyone.
No.
Good morning, Frode.
They were here before me.
Hi. I was here an hour ago because I had it down as Eastern Standard.
Jamie, good to see you,
Hi,
dear.
good to see you
Hi,
too.
darling. Hi.
Love your enthusiasm as always, Jamie. Let me just
So
check.
Jamie Blustein is one of our colleagues from the ACM Hypertext crowd. And hopefully one of our mentors now, our main mentor for the school that we've developed, that Claus and I have developed. So it's great.
Fantastic.
Oh.
And we have some old timers. Danila, I haven't seen you in many, many years.
No, I haven't.
Yeah. Oh,
My copy of mapping information is in a box somewhere because I
He sent
haven't
me
been, I
Bob
haven't
sent
been
me
able
this
to.
signed it,
Yes.
Jamie. Look. I had a
Oh,
signed copy.
lucky you.
Uh,
I know.
I've only got stuff autographed by Ted.
I feel very blessed.
Jamie, that's a good point. Let me just show you from here to here. Everyone's been in the future of text.
Wow.
That's cool.
And that's
Oh,
missing a
I'm
few.
so jealous. You have bookshelves. They moved me to a new office
Reverted to paper.
and they promised me, and everybody got this and that, and the VR people got huge rooms and VR treadmills and stuff. And I said, all I want is storage. And they said, no problem. We'll bring all your bookshelves. We have lots of. And then they said, oh, there's no place to anchor them. We don't have studs in the walls. They just put drywall up over empty space. So my books are in boxes. They're in other people's labs.
Oh.
It's been a year. I can't find anything.
Hi, Bob.
hello.
Our guest of honor has arrived. Bob, good to see you this morning.
Good to see you.
Everybody's excited. And I'm very happy that one of my students from the hypertext class is here. So Money Lee is here from my class.
Good. Which one?
See Mooney there? Mooney? He's waving at you?
Ted? Is that it?
No, Mooney Lee is here from my class.
Oh, okay. I see you down. You're way down at the other end of my linear list of people here.
That's right.
I see. Okay, good.
And of course, Mark Anderson's here. He wouldn't miss the history of hypertext experience if God pulled him off. And Peter, good to see you.
Hi, Mark.
Good to see everybody this morning. Happy Martin Luther King Day for those of us in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
National holiday. A good way to celebrate.
I've named it Black Monday.
Ha!
There's that too. Good morning. Good to see you again. Thanks for coming.
Hi. Good to see you too.
I'd like to give it a few more minutes, Frode, because I think we're going to have a few more people bopping in. So I want to make sure we have time. One of my former students from the hypertext class I taught emailed me and said, "Oh my God, I have a previous engagement. I can't be there, but are you taping this?" And I said, "Absolutely." So he's very excited to hear Bob talk and all. So
That's cute, using the term taping.
We still dial a phone.
Very cute.
We still publish papers.
I do. My father would always call my schoolhouse, and the refrigerator was an ice box.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just some things we call it Xeroxing still, Kleenex instead of tissue. So there's just some things that don't go away easily.
Yeah. My grandparents had an actual ice box.
Yeah,
You
I
could
bet
see
they
where,
did.
you could see where the block of ice went.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was right above the first storage.
We go fishing, and my father had a huge, thick box, and he would put big ice blocks in for the fish.
Mm-hmm.
So, Fabien, good morning. Good to see you.
Almost see you.
Almost see you. I see the chat. Let me get the chat open so I can monitor that.
I'm going to put the link into the page for today.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you for doing that. We'll give it one more minute and then we'll get started because I don't want to miss any time to talk.
Dene, should we do brief introductions by people? Maybe that'll take the minute.
Yeah, that'd be great. Why don't you lead that, Frode?
Okay, I'll lead that and then hand over to you. Jim Strahorn, you have 10 seconds to comply.
I'm in Menlo Park. I'm in Menlo Park, California, waiting to listen to Bob Horn. I've been working with him for the last 15 years.
Wow, excellent timing. Ted, nice to see you again. It's been a while.
Good morning. I'm Ted Fordyce. I work in WSU Vancouver. I'm very excited about this. I've been working with mapping hypertext through concepts, and so this is right up my interest level right now.
Beautiful. Jimmy.
I'm Jimmy Blustein. I'm at Dalhousie on the east coast of Canada. I've been working in hypertext for a long time. I first went to the conference in 1996.
Wow.
And my master's thesis and my PhD were both about hypertext. I'm very interested, and my lab is called Haiku, Hypertext Augmenting Intelligent Knowledge Use.
Ah.
Perfect, Jamie. And then Jimmy, 6 Degrees of Freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for picking up on that. Like the name says, I'm actually very interested in exploring XR as a visualization medium for high dimensional data graphs and for navigating spatial computing as a communications medium. And I've followed you guys. I've watched a lot of your groups goings on YouTube, and followed closely those of you that were on Twitter. So, big fan of this effort. Thanks, everybody.
Very glad to have you in the actual meetings. Very good. And Dene's student Muni, is that how we pronounce your name?
Yes, Mooney Lee. I'm a DTC student in Dene's digital storytelling class. We went over hypertext in our last class, and I'm here to learn more.
Fantastic.
I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here.
Danila.
Yes, hello everyone. I've been waiting to listen to Bob after I met him, I think like 15 years ago. And since then, I've been working on the new platform we developed for structured communication, like structured writing together with visual language in one system. And I really want to hear what updates Robert has came up with over the past years.
Fantastic. Glad to have you here. And Bob, I'm going to skip you because it is about you today. But now, Mr. Anderson.
Hi, I'm Mark Anderson, calling in from not so warm Portsmouth, South UK. I'm a hypertext researcher, basically partly independent and partly at the University of Southampton.
Thanks, Mark. Abhirami, it's good to see you again.
Hi, good to see you. Hi, everyone. I'm Abhirami and I'm connecting from India. I'm doing my PhD in English at IIT Kanpur, and my research focuses on the intersections of print and digital experimental narratives. And I'm really excited for today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Fabien, who just received his headset, I believe. A 10-second intro, Fabien.
Okay.
Can't hear you, Fabien. Okay, I'll come back to you. Look at your audio settings. I had problems too this morning. Rob.
Can I mention something? So I sent him that last, Thursday? Tuesday or something like that. And it came so fast. And I was afraid they were going to charge me $5,000 to ship that at first. And then I got it down to $106.
Calm down. All right, calm down. Right. Rob.
Okay, as it says at the bottom of my screen, I'm Rob Swigart. I'm a sometime hypertext author and mostly an author of books. I'm interested in the future of writing and text in particular in environments other than regular atmosphere.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rob. Chris.
I'm a independent researcher with interest in distributed and decentralized open systems. So, all things that, including discourse and hypertext and such. So.
Fantastic. And John, in the virtual, so far I've only seen you in the flesh. Welcome, welcome. Introduction, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Barber. I'm a hypertext. I'm here to learn more. Should be interesting.
And Brandel.
Hello, my name is Brandel, and I am an enthusiast about hypertext as it relates, to information as it relates to bodies. So embodied cognition and extended mind. Realizing that now that we have information of a kind that we can put around us in space with that we have the ability to interact with our bodies, with that we should try, and we should think about what it is that a whole person can get out of being in this space, feeling things, seeing things, rather than just looking at tiny grids of rectangles and interacting with sort of infinitesimal two-dimensional points. I work on the internet, so I build web standards for what the spatial web will be, designing the HTML model element and other things. So very, very excited to have the ability to also reach back into what people have thought about hypertext, what people have thought connection and information have been, and for the very important purposes that Bob has been able to kind of participate in through his consultancy and his research over the decades. They're the critical research points, and I really look forward to what we're going to get out of today.
Thank you, Brandel. Peter, can you say pretty much what you wrote, or would you prefer it to be muted today? So muted, right. So I'll just read Peter's text. I'm a lawyer, programmer, and independent scholar, and part of the core Future of Text group. My main interests are hypertext, end-user programming, university futures, world fairs, and technocities. And we'll try you again, Fabien. Come in, Brussels.
Is it working this time?
Yes.
Yes, super. So I'll keep it short. 10 seconds. I got reminded before even starting to try. I'm in the intersection of this, that, and that. So namely, I'm trying to build prototypes and the intersection of knowledge work and XR, because I think this is the place, virtually and physically and intellectually. This is the opportunity to dig into what knowledge is and shape it. So I'm excited by this.
Perfect. So that was wonderful. Welcome, everyone. Over to you, Dene.
All right, so let's get started. Nice crowd. Thank you all for being here. And Mooney, you're going to see these are a lot of really great people for you to be introduced to. So we'll talk about this when I see you in class. So anyway, I want to welcome everybody to this conversation with Bob Horn about mapping hypertext. This is the first formal presentation scheduled for 2025 that Frode and I have been working on. I'm Dene Grigar. I work at Washington State University, Vancouver. I teach there and direct the program called Digital Technologies and Culture. Been working in hypertext since, 1991, when Nancy Kaplan introduced me to Michael Joyce's Afternoon of Story and Mark Bernstein's story space software. I'm working with Frode on the Future of Text and XR project that's funded by the Sloan Foundation. And this year is our second year of our grant. And these presentations and theme talks are part of that grant project. So thank you for being here. I am so happy to be moderating this event. Bob is a pioneer, and I've had so many wonderful conversations with him over the last couple of months. He's studied many areas. He's pioneered many areas of study, mostly hypertext, information structures, information mapping, visual language. That's just a few of the many. If you look at his webpage on Wikipedia, there's a whole list of things that he's been involved in. He's published a lot of books over his long, successful career, an amazing career. But we're talking about one today, and that is Mapping Hypertext, right? And we gave you all a download to the book that's on the Internet Archive. Now, we're focusing on this publication for two reasons from my perspective. I chose the book, I wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it because it addresses a lot of the challenges the Future of Text and XR team has faced in our project in developing the VR environment in year one, right? We're trying to create, answer the question, what is text in VR? What is knowledge in VR? And we're continuing to think about in year two. So namely, we're trying to think about how we best represent knowledge, which for many people has been a book or some sort of essay publication, but doing it in a 360-degree, three-dimensional, and highly immersive and interactive space so that users can read and author documents effectively. And that's why Sloan gave us the money. We're being asked to look at this and think about what it means to create and to read and to experience in this environment. And we're doing it with open source technologies, right? Trying to do this without proprietary software, so to speak. The second reason I'm interested in this is because I'm interested in the history of digital technologies, especially hypertext. And I've been reaching back in my own work because I came from pre-web hypertext with StorySpace and HyperCard and all of those software programs that we're developing. I'm thinking about pre-web ideas, right? What was it that was happening in those days that I remember, that I experienced, that has the potential to help us today think through the issues in what I see as the post-web period, right? Of native app environments, loss of industry support for websites, AI, the metaverse, and in terms of our project, XR. So that's really at the heart of what I'm interested in, and how we can bring these together and bridge those ideas. So following this introduction, when I'm through in a second, Bob's going to talk about these ideas. And we posted some of these research questions in the website that you have a link to, and Frode's going to repost so that all of you can access it. So we're going to have him talk about the book, then we're going to move into the questions, and then we're going to have an open discussion, right? So we can all talk about this. And I'm hoping at the end of this discussion, we can have some clarity, some directions that we can go as a team to continue building out our XR project. And for those of us that are interested in writing about this, have some ideas kindled in our minds about what to do, what to say, how to move forward. So thank you once again for being here. So I'd like to turn this over to Bob Horn. Thank you, Bob.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Share. All right. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I wish you all the wonderful joy of having written a book 35 years ago and having people devote a couple of hours to it today. It's a joyous experience for me, and I thank you all, especially Frode and Dene, for inviting me. What I've been involved in most of my career has been, how do we improve human thinking? Began all back in 1960 or so, somewhere in there, at the first Institute for Educational Technology in the world at Columbia University. Out of that, I had a couple of years of research to do anything I wanted, and I decided I would create a science of human learning materials. That is the representation of human thinking. Out of that came some work on information mapping, which I'll briefly refer to from time to time here, but mainly focus on what came after that. So we're talking about mapping hypertext. And the first question is, what was I trying to do back then in 1987 when I started working on the book? I had basically just started. I had a company called Information Mapping, and we had a lot of customers whom I thought needed to know about hypertext. I had known Doug Engelbart for about 10 or 15 years at that point. I'd come to see him a couple of times a year. Although I lived in Boston, he lived out here in California. So I wanted to introduce hypertext to my information mapping customers. They were mainly the very largest companies in the world and governments, and especially those people who did technical writing or business writing for their companies. At the point when I wrote Mapping Hypertext, we had trained somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 writers in business and government. That's not 30,000 or 40,000. That's 300 or 400,000. And they'd paid us. Every one of them had paid us for that. They were our customers, and they needed to know about this new thing coming along, hypertext. The biggest thing I could imagine at the time was that a whole company might adopt hypertext. I had no vision of the World Wide Web at that point, or when I was working on mapping hypertext. Once I got started, I realized that I was very interested also in visualization. And I had an idea that there was something called visual language that was emerging. And so I thought I'll try to incorporate that into how I write the book. And then as I was writing along came a notion, an encounter with Stephen Toulmin, the philosopher who had invented argumentation mapping. And I said, I've got to have a chapter on that because it is a different structure from the structure that I have for information mapping. Mapping has to do with what we think we know. Argumentation mapping has to do with what we're debating about, what we're still not agreeing upon in any way, but how to structure that debate in a visual way, by the way. And then as I went along, I came across my own, I essentially invented the notion of structured abstracts. I'll show you each of these as we go along. Also, I wanted the book to have rapid access, ease of scanning, and I had to do all this on MacDraw. I don't know how many of you remember MacDraw, but it was the first vector program, and I was inserting and removing an awful lot of disks back then to do the book. At the end of this, I'll talk about what has resulted from my working on mapping hypertext. So first of all, we wanted to introduce hypertext to information mapping customers. So, if those of you who have the book or have downloaded the book, you'll see, started out with the very basic information. What is it? What is it? And a definition. And notice a simulation in here of hyperlinks in the book. The whole book has these little arrows with page numbers, which will link you around in the book. And what we were trying to do was connect that with what our customers already knew how to do. They mainly wrote things like textbooks, procedures, policies, documentation, and other kinds of business communications. Often it has to do with very serious and academic-like writing, particularly in engineering and in the sciences. And what I had found in my research at Columbia was that for stable subject matters that pretty much everybody in the field agree on, you can take each one of the sentences in such a subject matter, let's say in their textbook, and you can sort those sentences into 40 categories. And we've trained 400,000 people to do that. And they agree. These are the 40 categories here on the right-hand side. That's how I put it in the book. This is how I start to represent it these days with visual language. You'll see that each one of these is a small information chunk. Each one of those. And the items on the left are the classes or groups of those kinds of information chunks. So it isn't that you're just sitting there with a sentence in your hand and wondering what to do with it. You've got a place to put it. And we've shown that people can do that with a great reliability, sufficient reliability for companies like AT&T, which adopted it as it was the biggest company in the world at the time. So the larger field of that is called structured writing. The company was called information mapping, and it, as I said, divided. One would put the sentences or the parts of sentences into really three different kinds. Some where there was all text, some where there were tables, and some where there were diagrams or illustrations. I won't go into much more of that. There's a whole chapter in the book about that, chapter 3. But I also had at the time, 1987, there were a lot of issues that were completely undecided in scaling up hypertext, which our customers were going to have to face because nobody faced them before. Nobody even had itemized them before my book. So there's a chapter 2, that some of those we haven't discussed deeply ourselves until now, even, or implemented at least until now. Exploring then visual language in the book, I said, all right, I'm going to do as much visualization and ask the question, how do we put together words and visual elements where the visual is doing what it does best and what the words do what they do best? That is a central principle of my of my visual language book. And this is just one example where I was trying it out for the first time. I got to try things out for the first time in mapping hypertext. Then there was, apart from the things that we thought we knew, there were things that we were debating about. And Toulmin had come up with a very good way of structuring information. I'm very much, as you all know, or many of you know, very much interested in how we structure information. That is, with specific types of information where you put the sentences and you leave out all the rest of the sentences. Very important in structuring information visually as to what you leave out Actually, I haven't written a very good chapter about how to leave out information. That would be a good thing to work on one of these days, for me or somebody else. I invite you. And then, as I was applying this, I was of course reading all the research that I could find on text and visualization and their integration, because it was people were beginning to see how and do research even in those days about how to put words and visual elements together and how to integrate them. What do words do best? What do visual elements do best? How are they structured? And I realized that I didn't like reading most of their academic papers. The way academic papers are written is terrible in my view, because they just go on and on and on, and you can't find the information that you want. So I invented visual structured abstracts. This is one research paper. There are several others, of course, in the back of mapping hypertext. And finally, I wanted to include at least a history of hypertext up to that point, which of course did not include the World Wide Web at all, but did include a couple of pages on Doug Engelbart, one of which I want to point out in the bottom row of this map. You'll see that I identified Doug as inventing and outlining software and the first idea of how to structure information. His idea, as I understood it, was to have the important idea in any paragraph be the first sentence, so that with one click you could get a summary of it. Very important for the world of information overload, even in and certainly in today's world. So finally, I wanted to design the book for easy to scan and easy access. So I experimented with the contents, as you'll see. On the left-hand side, the list of every single important idea in the table of contents, easily read. And on the right, an attempt to visualize it. A very primitive, and I was just learning. Hey, I was just learning to do visualization. I had not been to any design school or anything like that. So I was doing an awful lot of this as experimentation. And then I included the list of every important idea at the beginning of every chapter. That way, the poor reader has a chance to understand what's going on. So as a result of this, what's happened? Well, and what can you do? I've put all the early research on information mapping in a book on the Internet Archive, which you can download. It's all our early research reports, the very first instructional material that we were trying to build as a result of it. You've got structured abstracts in various forms. We worked on NASA with structured abstracts. I also might point out that I don't know that I suspect that this was a parallel invention that the editors of all the major medical journals have now adopted and required structured abstracts for every academic paper that they that they will accept. Structured argumentation mapping is now a small but growing field. I've taught some courses in it. The New Scientists gave us some money to work on it and advance it. And of course, there was our major project of the Turing debate, whether computers can think, which of course we're still discussing now, which we made in 7 posters with something like 800 major moves in the argument in 60 different questions. That's what you have to structure that. You can't just write on and on and on and on for 400 pages and expect anybody to deal with it. And of course, I did visual language, and many of you here know about my information murals, which are on my website. At that point, I think I'll stop. And what do we do next, Dene? Oh, wait a minute. I don't hear you. And I'm going to...
We have questions. So if you want to unshare, at the top, there's a red button that says stop sharing.
No, stop.
Should be at the top of the screen. Stop sharing. If not,
stop sharing. It's at the bottom.
At
Okay.
the bottom, on top of
All
mine.
right.
Okay, great. Who
All
knows?
right. Wait a minute.
Got it? Okay.
Mine won't go. Okay. Can you? Is that all right now?
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay. Good.
So from everybody, let's give him a hand. Thank you, Bob, for sharing that with us. And
Good.
we will be. Can we share these slides with everybody once?
Oh yes, sure, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you can download the whole book. You know, you not only those slides, but the whole book is downloadable.
Yeah, I mentioned in the chat that what he was showing came from the book. So if you have the book, all of that's there. But I think what you've done is you've consolidated a lot of the book into those slides. So that might be helpful also. Definitely something we can teach. So very easily with our students, those of us that teach. I just dropped the questions into the chat, and I'd like to read those, and then I'll turn over to Danila, who wants to ask a question. So if you look at the questions, we have I went through and I made notes as I was reading the book, and I dropped the notes into the chat earlier. But one of the things that struck me as I was reading the book was his vision of VR. He was already talking about VR in 1989, right? Or that's when the book came out in 1987. And so what can we tease out from those? And I gave you specific page numbers. So even the questions that I posed on the website, what is a book in this VR XR environment? What can it be? And that comes specifically from pages 16 to 17. If you downloaded the book, you can go straight there and see, what I was referencing. And then I have 3 sub-research questions. The first one is, how can information be structured in this kind of environment? And that's page 198 to 99. Sub-question 2, what affordances of the environment can be utilized? What can we do with this beautiful space we've got? We're moving from a 2-dimensional space for writing to this incredible 360-degree 3-dimensional space. How can we leverage that and do something with it to make writing, authoring, reading, thinking, and to enhance that? And then thirdly, what does authoring mean in this scenario? And this is this is wide open question. So those are the 3 I thought of. I'm sure there's others that you can tease out of the book. And I gave you my notes. Anything that's yellow highlighted are like my quibbles. But the green is the question that I was really interested in. How does information mapping change in XR? All right, so I saw that Danila had his hand up. So you want to start your comments?
Sure.
Yes, I have a question about who is responsible now for moving forward the vision of improving human thinking and augmented human intelligence and collective intelligence and so on, now that, for example, Engelbart is not with us. And what do you think should be done to lead this forward? Like that's the most important question, I think.
Well, we're all responsible for improving human thinking. And we're all responsible for deciding if for some of the for some of the kinds of thinking that we have to do, that we are going to represent them in a structured way. And for others, let's say, and I guess I should say, a visibly structured way, because certainly one will say that we're taught in our writing classes in high school and so forth to organize information, but often we're then told to disguise the structure so that it all looks the same. And I'm extremely against that. For the kind of analytical and structured or longer documents, not having to do with telling stories, for example, like novels and short stories and short emails. Don't worry about the structure. But once you realize that you are living in a continuously information overloaded world, you have to structure information for other people if you expect at least some of us to read what you're writing. Fortunately, my use of the new large language systems, the chat GPTs and their kind, know this, and they're doing it. And therefore, I'm preferring to read their summaries of your writing than your writing, if you're still writing just on and on and on and on in pure text without any kind of structuring, or which includes formatting of as you can see from the book, your copies of the book. But I think that all of back to Danila's question, we are all responsible for doing this and for helping him, adding along this. For example, I'm going to do one other thing right now. When I say structuring, I'm going to. Oh, I don't see it.
The bottom of the screen. You're trying to share at the bottom of the screen, maybe.
Yeah, but I've got is Jim. Jim is Jim. You're sharing your screen, are you? Or something? I can't get you off.
I'm not.
I can't get you off my screen.
Oh no.
There are.
Shall I take myself off?
What?
There are speaker, gallery, and multi-speaker modes, often in the top right view. And there's also the ability to pin people. So if you hover over a person, there are 3 dots, and if you pin somebody, then they will take a persistent role, and then you can unpin them using that. Actually, no, the unpin is top left. So I have Dene pinned now, and I can unpin her. But that puts me, yes.
Let's see what I've got.
You're not gone.
Bob, so if you look at the top where it says recording and that red button, there it is.
There we go.
You can
you see something?
Yes, we got it. Thank
absolutely.
you.
Okay, one of the things that I'm working on right now is what I call scaffoldings, which are really large diagrams. But they're, as many of you know, I've been working on what I call information murals, which may have 400 or 500 visual elements and 400 or 500 verbal elements that are tightly integrated in visual language form. So is there just one structured way of doing that? No, there are 25 or 30. At least these are the ones that I've collected in the last week to see how I look at this. I invite all of you to do that sort of thing, and provide your examples. This is a JPEG, so I can mostly go around. I can show. Does that begin to answer your question, Danila?
To some extent, yes, but there are some specific names that I wonder if you're familiar with, such as Bill Benson and David Hayes.
No.
Bill Benson and his teacher David Hayes, they developed a historical analysis of human cognition and basically showed that there were 4 cognitive ranks. First is essentially speech, second is writing, third is kind of structured writing and calculations, and then fourth is like computation and systems thinking. And all of these are related to what kind of tools we use to structure information and processes. And there's quite a bit of theory and analysis, and I think it's really practical. So like, I know that there are some people, I've mentioned in the chat also Peter Senge, and I don't know if you've heard about former Minister of Intelligence Development from Venezuela, Luis Alberto Machado. Like a few people who have been doing work kind of close to the scale of Douglas Engelbart's project. And what I'm interested in is, like, you say we are all responsible, but like, who is a little bit more responsible? And people like Elliot Jacks, for example, left a legacy of this intellectual development theories. And the question is, okay, what do we do now that there is this challenge from artificial intelligence not on the horizon, but now? And to me, it's really a question of like tactical organization today, not just theoretical interest or academic interest.
Fabien's had his hand up, so maybe he has something to contribute to this, and then we can hear back from Bob. Fabien?
So it's basically, I wish every information was structured. I wish everything and like from a technical standpoint, everything was JSON or some way that it was something I could just use and program with. It would be extremely useful for me. And yet, I'll just put on the webcam briefly. I don't even know what that is, but it's notes from some of the latest. The content doesn't really matter, but it's notes I took while having a discussion with a teacher a couple of days ago. But the point is, it is kind of structured. I made some lines, I made some sketches, but it's definitely not JSON. Like, I cannot use this on the computer. I cannot easily share it with you except very roughly through the screen. And the tension I have is every time I'm thinking pretty much, I'm like, should I structure this more? Am I going to do this again in 1 year, 5 years, 50 years? I have no freaking idea. And it's honestly emotionally stressful because, again, I wish everything was structured and I wish we could like share it with others instantly. But I feel it's kind of a bet on the future. And will it be relevant or not? Or is it like on the spot, like, I don't know, grocery list to say something like newly vulgar? Is like, who cares if it's structured or not? And yet, if it was actually structured, I could do it next time probably more efficiently. So it's really, I don't know how to do this. I wish every information around me for myself first, because that's how I think, but everybody also in this chat, in this discussion would be structured so that we could, again, pass it around. But it's expensive. It is expensive to write it down, to jolt it down, to structure it visually and technically, otherwise the data format. So I'm struggling with this. What should I do? I don't know how to ask this properly. It's a constant struggle.
First of all, I work with the notion that it's best to write down in sentences what your problem is. Actually write them down, write out the sentences. I think it's best, I tend to do that now for myself with Microsoft Word because I can dictate them. And then I will add a bolded headline of some kind that will enable me to even structure my own thinking and be able to put that into some sort of maybe class of problems. If I'm writing, this is a problem. That's the first step. Do that and send it to me, Fabien. and we'll talk more about it. All right.
Hey, Bob, I was going to say your desktop was a good example of unstructured knowledge.
Yes.
I saw that and I thought maybe you were doing it on purpose.
No, I am. No, it is on purpose. Partially because what I then was able to show you was the 25 or so scaffoldings. Now that's something which I've just done in the last week, and I realized I want a software that will. Right now, I have my thoughts in folders with little names, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want a software that will take those folders and instantly show me the visual scaffoldings of them. In other words, I want. Do you want me to reply to share again this thing? I will do it. I want.
Share away, Bob.
I want this to come up when I click on a folder.
Yeah.
Right? Because I can see much better what I want than reading the whole list of things. At least that's for me. And I would love to have it.
If Fabien's calling that,
Fabien can make a prototype of it. I'll be both grateful. I use a Macintosh, Fabien.
It's just sorry to get through the line, but I couldn't help when you share the screen, both sharing this and the desktop, because I was thinking indeed what would be a way to do this, what would be in XR or otherwise, like how to handle this. And I put in the chat, but it reminds me of it's not my notion, but semantic zooming. Like, what do you want to hide and show based on how far or how many of those documents you want to handle? But it is a struggle I think we share.
It would be similar to, but not exactly the same as your wall that you did and showed us. But it's a different kind of structuring and construction and interaction. But I've started to make a whole bunch of these because this is the way I want to be able to look at my own thinking.
So, Bob, I'm going to let Mark talk, but I'm going to intercede just 1 second and say that what you're looking at is two-dimensional. When we move into the XR space, my interest is how we make that idea expand into 360 3D, right? And then make it interactable.
Well, Mark, first you got to do it in 2D.
Yeah. Or maybe. I mean, some of us think already in 3D.
No, I can't. I have to be able. I can think in 25 or 30 piece chunks.
Yeah.
On that scaffolding, of which each one of those has maybe 50 or 100 other information chunks that are structured. So what do we have? We have 25 times 10 is 250 times double that times that's 500 chunks of information that I can handle. Maybe I can handle, and there's certainly more than that on many of my information murals.
Hey, Bob, so I grew up with my mother was a painter and a sculptor. And so she could think in 3D. I mean, she really worked well in a three-dimensional environment. That's what sculpting takes. She thought in 3D. Her 2D paintings always reminded me of 3D experiences. So she was a 3D thinker. I find that people that want to be sculptors that don't think in 3D don't do very good work. Mark has his hand up, and then we have also Mark, and who else had the hand up? Somebody else.
Claus did. So I put mine down to put him at the front. Anyway, here I am. Yeah, I found myself at the front for once.
Slowly, Mark. Yes. I can't understand very fast talkers.
I'm sorry, it's my appalling foreign accent. Okay, Bob. I was thinking when you showed your last slide.
Yeah.
To me that my mind sort of goes back to Engelbart's view specs. It's the same data, just shown differently, and you have there an amazing array of things. The interesting part is how you structure the writing to allow that visualization. I do recall essentially decomposing several of your murals by basically copying the text off the mural and reconstructing it into a Tinderbox document. Tinderbox is Story Space's younger sister, less of a sort of creative writing tool and more of a hypertextual tool. So I think that is possible. I think if you want to do that kind of thing, I think it forces one to think about writing in different tools. So probably not a word processor, which I understand is a familiar place to start. But I think it requires one to start sort of thinking in terms of the utterances you make and record, putting them into a tool that is capturing structure, because that is part of the scaffolding that allows you to do your scaffolding. So that all the little bits are there. The other part that each visualization has to know is a certain amount of the visualization that you want from it. So that's another interesting authorial bit of work to do, because you don't necessarily want exactly the same styling within the generic view at the same time. So it's interesting. I mean, what it exposes is the extra work that it places on us, or the different approach to stating our problems or thoughts than we're used to. So our education is in writing the long form narrative. Start at the top of the page, right to the bottom. And what you're quite eloquently getting to is that if we want the power of these alternative presentations, we need to think a bit more about how we do what we call writing.
Well, what I would respond to that is that every sentence, now this, okay, there are going to be exceptions. All right, I'm not going to argue about the other and the exception, but I'm going to say every sentence can be analyzed and can be put in three different places, or from three different categories. One, the subject matter. Take a sentence like the Boeing 777 is 300 feet long. It's not, but anyway, that's a statement which I would categorize in the subject matter. However, if you look at my information mapping and structured writing categories, I would categorize it as a fact. It fits in one of the 40 categories that I mentioned and showed you, and it's a fact. So it fits in two different categories. And then it also fits in a structure. That is, you can say, no, it's not 300, feet long. Then it begins to be a claim in an argumentation structure, of which you eliminate a whole bunch of other kinds of sentences, all the other individual sentences, except the ones that you're going to include in your debate structure or your argumentation structure. So any sentence has three different situation. I don't know what to call these. 3 different situations.
Rhetorical situations.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I've just dropped in it's an XML file if you don't have tinderbox, but as an explanation of what I mean is I've just dropped a file, it'll be uploading shortly, which is the Narex poster with essentially all those sentences pulled out and put into discrete things. I'll stop now so I'll have a chance to speak, but watch for that in the chat shortly. Thank you.
We have Claus. Claus next. Claus.
Yeah, thank you. I took a couple of notes actually, so I guess I could talk for 1 hour. But only very, very briefly what popped up in my mind. So first of all, somebody said, the information should be more structured. His own information should be more structured because it becomes more useful later. So the question is actually, are we lacking tools that would allow us to structure easily? And the other thing, what I wanted to mention is, you talked about AI and how AI could automate the structuring, basically could create summaries and could restructure information. I think this is one thing. I mean, yes, we could automate the structuring process, but I believe we should also focus on typical hypertext issues like you have something in your mind and you want to express this. So hypertext is a tool for structuring information from humans and for humans, basically, mainly. Aside, AI doing some other structuring. But the actual question, what I wanted to ask is, if looking at your infographics, they do not necessarily, have boxes, so to speak. So if you think about hypertext, you always have these nodes which are kind of boxes. Also in Tinderbox, you also have your nodes and they appear as boxes. Should we actually get rid of the boxes, which would make a greater space in which you can seamlessly change the data structure border. So you could dissolve boxes, you would see the content which is structured, you could dissolve that content and you would see another structure and you could go out basically. And I'm not talking about zoomable user interfaces as Jeff Raskin did. I'm not talking about semantic zooming. I'm talking about the structural components that would allow to box and unbox magically, so to speak, by using the system. So infinitive zooming and infinitive, small structural atoms, so to speak, depending on the level you're at.
Well, I haven't been able to do that. We may have different descriptions in our minds about what hypertext is when we use the word hypertext. I think of hypertext as linking. You can click on something in the current document you're looking at it, and it goes someplace else that was designated by somebody else, or maybe you. And that's it. It doesn't have to do with anything like boxes for me. So I was puzzled and I still am puzzled by when you refer to boxes and hypertext, I'm not quite sure.
Just to clarify, the hypertext you're referring to is known as navigational hypertext, which consists of nodes and links. So you basically you're linking nodes.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And the nodes is what appear as boxes inside your head or inside somebody's head. So if you draw, and also your book shows that you have documents which are kind of boxes that have some content, and you link basically that different content by drawing lines. So we talk you visualize actually boxes and boxes as nodes. You link those. And my question actually is referring to the fact that inside those boxes, you have structure too. And inside that structure, you also have structure. So wouldn't it make sense to dissolve all the boxes and say, okay, it depends on the level you're looking at, by looking at the documents or looking at whatever you see, and you can zoom in, and the boxes dissolve. So we are not talking about a document which is kind of framed in your head, but you're talking about something that is more visual and that is more zoomable, basically, like infographics are sometimes, because you do not draw a box around, surrounding something.
Can I intercede? I'm going to intercede here. Claus is working in an area called spatial hypertext, in which it's not just about linking with string or line, but the proximity of text, proximity of information, right? Which I think holds a lot of promise for XR and the work we do in the future of hypertext. So,
well, I think I just respond to Claus one more time. Please make an example, and I'll be happy to work with you on it. I'm very much in favor of, we can talk about ideas like we're talking now, but we have to then represent them in boxes and sentences, or non-boxes and non-sentences, and send them to each other.
Mm-hmm. Claus has been working in that area. He's got lots of examples, and he just got a large grant to do story worlds in hypertext, which I think is very cool. Fabien has had his hand up, and then we'll go to Danila after that. So Fabien?
So I think one way to possibly do this, which I'd be genuinely interested in trying, and I think is basically that I also took notes for this, kind of structured, kind of sentences with how do you say, a Yorkie in this, but it's basically, if I need the book, so I have the actual physical book, I have the PDF, but to be honest, I need the source files. I need the vector files that you worked on. I need all the post-it notes you had with it, because if I want to dissolve, to take the word you use, Claus, I need the source. And that means probably having to pull through a ton of things you might not want to share, because maybe there were post-it notes that you had that spark ideas in a totally random place. Let's say the bathroom or the shower, to be polite. So it's for people to dissolve, or like we had a little thought experiment in the group about rebinding a book, where we were to tear apart and then put them in a different way, because that's what somebody who is reading, I want to say seriously, but in quote there, a book or any kind of document will do. You need to tear it apart, and for this you need the source files. You need, and ideally also all structured. So I think that's kind of the challenge there is. Basically, the publishing process is totally off, like sending a physical book or a PDF. It's kind of cute, but then if you actually have to work with the data, the content of the book, we need a lot more than this.
Yes, I would refer you to a Norwegian man who has written a book and has been teaching courses. He's now just retired, and his idea is called Giga mapping. Giga, Giga mapping, probably .org or something like that. You'll find it. And he comes out of the system design world and has been communicating in the international system design. He also has a very good book on what you're talking about, Fabien, and it's called Designing Complexity. Got that? Okay.
Do we want to go to Danila now? And then we have Frode and Brandel.
Yeah, I wanted to basically point in a direction that maybe to understand how these tools can be improved, what is needed is a little bit of generalization. And when we're talking about visual language and spatial hypertext and structured documents, etc., this basically invites us thinking about the whole history of development of writing and visual writing, which Robert, to a large extent, did in his another book, Visual Language, but I mean, not 100%. And then it becomes obvious that it's actually a number of simple rules and different types of maps, from mind maps to concept maps to argument maps, etc. They actually can be structured and understood in a simple and unified way. Which then allows us to very easily and very simply basically create a new language, a set of simple standards, protocols, and tools, which is not about creating a variety of applications, etc., but basically saying, okay, you only need 33 letters. If you are writing in Cyrillic, of course, and then like you only need like 7 colors, etc. And in my view, I've been studying this like based on the work of Engelbart, Horn, and others. I think it's actually quite doable and quite simple, and we're like 80% there. And then we would be able to explain to people that you have different modes of communication and thinking, similar to what I mentioned before about Bill Benson, where people can speak, that's the stream of thought, verbalized. They can draw, create images in a notebook, which are unstructured, but then we can combine that. And in addition to human thinking, we can also use AI and LLMs because they're very good at parallel processing, maybe not precise, not structured, but quite powerful. And I think that this actually raises a question of upgrading the human language. And I've written some speculative fiction about how human history went in a wrong direction, starting in ancient Babylon and Sumer, because there they had some very good ideas about how to think better, but then they basically created this simple language, alphabetic language, which is what you think, you speak it, then you write it with letters. And that was the wrong turn. So like, what do you think about basically doing those few extra steps and creating the coherent theory of information, knowledge, etc., and then turning that into human augmentation?
Well, there are visions of that around. Just last week, I ran into a book called, it's got alien in the title, Alien Languages or something like that. And the philosopher, a Swedish philosopher, is trying to imagine what that might be like, and what all of the different kinds of such languages might be like. I haven't read the book, so I can't say anything more about that. But if you can do a search on alien languages and see if you get it, and if not, I'll be able to go in my file and get it for you before the end of the meeting. Next person.
Frode is next.
I'm the next person. That's exciting. So one of the interesting things that I've really gotten from the presentation and discussion today is, of course, the say hi really briefly. We're talking now. Hi. It just came home from school. I got to work. Is that structuring happens at different times. It's not a one-off thing. So we structure when we write for our own thinking, which is, when I did my PhD, was my biggest challenge. One massive, horrible column. Claus had to read the whole thing, so did Mark. So I'm sorry. There's also structuring when reading. To a degree, a non-linear degree. Basically, annotating is putting your own structure onto it. So being able to combine these things, because structuring is, of course, adding metadata, right? It is giving some structure through saying what things are. A well-structured, even a paperback book, is a lot easier to read, even if the structure is non-visual. I'm a visual person, so Bob and I completely agree on the importance of visual, but the actual underlying structure has to be there for the visual structure to be useful, right? So one of the problems we have in our community here is partly that we serve academics, and academics want things in specific ways. This is, of course, for those of you who know, why I came up with the notion of visual meta, which is make a normal PDF at the end of it, put all the structure in. In our community, we're now using JSON for this, which is very, very interesting. I just wanted to highlight, to me, the really nice thing that we're going to bring into the work is thinking is one thing. but it's such a vague word. Structuring is a much more useful word. So when we're building the XR environments, what are we doing? We are trying to create useful structures for whatever part of the process we're doing. I just wanted to say thank you for that. And unless you have a comment, Bob, over to Brandel.
Nope, fine. Agreed.
I'm really interested in the sort of the arc of your thinking through. So I'm not sure in 89 or 87 when you were studying mapping hypertext whether you'd done a great deal of the neural work.
No,
but
none. Not a zero.
Right. That was my my suspicion. Not through any aspersions, but what would you add to mapping hypertext in order to characterize the thinking of what are the extra constraints or conditions for what a mural is? Sort of, and I guess more generally, like in terms of what you do with that space and what that space does to the idea of a hypertext. You know, Nirex and these other great elements that I've had the pleasure to sort of walk around in virtual space, and they have proximity, they have color, they have this level of detail. How would you characterize that? What would you add to what you've got in mapping hypertext in order to be able to sort of get folks around those concepts as well?
Well, a whole new book to begin with, visual language, which is only 20 years old. It's not 34 years old, and I stand behind it. And it's downloadable from the Internet Archive now because it's out of print. There it is. Thank you very much, Fabien. And Frode. Yep. So that begins to get it. But there's an analysis of only about 10 pages of diagramming. And diagramming is the frontier that we have, not only in this group, but it is a major frontier for large language systems like ChatGPT and others. They can't do it. And if you look at any issue of nature or science, these are academic publications, I point out, or most any medical journal, which of the medical journals publish something like 2 million or more articles. They all have diagrams. And I learned yesterday in a Zoom meeting like this that one of the problems that the journal editors are struggling with right now is that the authors are struggling with it because the journal editors have limited the number of figures to 4 or 5 when you submit it. So now what are scientists doing? Well, my friend yesterday showed me a typical article from Nature, which has only 5 figures, but each figure has 40 or so diagrams in it. So, and now there's he pointed out, now there's some sort of an effort on the part of people who cannot see to ask mathematicians and biologists and physicists and so forth to describe in words the 5 figures that they have, each of which has 40 or so individual diagrams in it, in words. That hasn't gotten very far yet, as I understand it. But that's where that's a frontier. That's a frontier.
Yeah. We have Fabien again, Frode, and Mark, and I think that might be the end of our day because we'll be at 10 o'clock. So Fabien?
Yes, I'll be quick. A lot of time I spend again is the little notebook I have to write my stuff. I have sketches on bigger pieces of paper. I have like gadgets like Remarkable, so e-ink. So I spend most of my time sketching because just it helped me think, even if I don't share it with anybody else. I share it with you here just as a way to do it, but it's really a tool to think. So in order to kind of like pull it back to XR, if you had unlimited budget times people and whatever, and you had to make a space for you, not even anybody else, to be able to sketch exactly how you want, as freely as you want, as efficiently as you want, how would you design that space? Do you actually already have it? And if not, what would it look like?
Well, I work from the ground up. So I like to have actual subject matter. I mean, I've learned a lot from working for a month, or for a year or a year and a half with NASA. And NASA has the problem of has something like 5,000 principal investigators like you folks. And each one has a problem, and they have, or more than one problem. And the problem is based on one or more descriptions of what they don't know. And the question was, how do you manage all this? Because we have to, those 5,000 problems have to be solved for the 15 missions that NASA is going to send out into space over the next 15 years. Now that's the kind of thing that you build up from. And that's what I like to work with, because and by the way, I can share those, what we did with you with Fabien. I have those files, and we worked on an adaptation of structured abstracts in that case for the manager, just to be able to see the whole, how do you see 5,000 of these, and how do you organize them, and how do you get reports on them, and so forth. So I like to work from that kind of real thing moving up, but happy to work with you on that.
Thank you. Frode, you have your hand up, and then Mark.
Yeah, briefly, you're talking about working on real stuff and structuring. Just wanted to show you guys something really quickly here, because I've been working on trying to do something simple, structuring my own notes this weekend. So these are my own documents related to this work, and each one of them has basic stuff. It's got key concepts and stuff, so I can do those nice little lines. But look at it. It's kind of a mess, right? And what I'm learning more and more, even though I think there is some hope in this being useful, is that these little boxes, they are the structures.
Yes.
And they really, you can't, well, you can, but if you want to be effective, you really have to listen to you, Bob, and try to put some real structure into your own notes, how they appear in your environment.
Yes.
I've been using AI and all kinds of things, and they're very, very useful in helping you get further lost.
Just to respond to that, Frode, you might have noticed in my notes, I use color coding.
I use color coding, I use tagging, I use all kinds of goodies, but the question is, when are they actually useful? And this is something that Mark has discussed a lot with me over the years. At a certain point, it's useful to put things around, but if you don't really know what your own notes say, how can you expect to have a system to help structure them?
Well, I noticed that your notes did not have what would, for me, be informative titles. They have names, 1 or 2 or 3 word phrases that you name them with, and that's very helpful for you. And it might be more helpful if you try to make a sentence out of the note, name of the notes.
That's a really important. That's a really important point. The issue there is threefold. Number one, space on the screen and a map. Number two, because I agree with you, the first 2 sentences of the document are in the box. But also, well, there was one more thing. Oh yeah, what Mark Anderson and Dave Millard wrote in the 7 hypertexts paper. If you are doing something like this for your own thinking or for presenting to someone else is very, very different. So I agree with you, Bob. It might have been useful for me, but not for you. And that is a very interesting, different use case for hypertext. So thank you for that. And over to Mark.
And I'll just say one thing. Almost all of what I've been working on has the assumption that it will be communicated to somebody else. I mean, I do make notes of all sorts. I keep a notebook like this, but I don't, then I translate those thoughts and into structured chunk. Those 40 chunks of information, each of which have 3 different characteristics that I mentioned. That's when I'm starting to communicate with others. I've not worked so much on the individual, except insofar as thinking about that, about communicating for others helps me organize my thoughts. Go ahead, Mark. Sorry to interrupt you.
No. I was just thinking there is some quite lively debate elsewhere about the issue of diagramming, and I think one of the things that's overlooked is that for personal use, i.e., an audience essentially of one, your exploration space is your memory palace. It may not make sense to anyone else, but it makes sufficient sense to you, and you're not expending unnecessary effort to make it look tidy because you already understand it. I think a problem comes that we assume that there is a simple, almost push-button mapping from that picture we create for ourselves to something that's communicable to other people.
Yeah.
And there is a lot more process in that than people assume. I'm seeing this at the moment. I'm working on a project to get reuse of data. And you can really see the cold legacy of print on it, how we've got all this digital information which we can't use because we're still trying to play printing on paper and when we're not actually doing anything anymore. And your case about the papers in Nature is there. Really, you just want something that shows the data underneath, but then the data has to be the prime object, not the paper. And I don't know we're societally ready to make that move yet. But anyway, I'll stop because there are other hands up. Thank you.
Hold on. I'm on a Zoom. Careful.
Okay, and I think the last comment will be from Danila, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you. I just wanted to very briefly show you how I did some of the notes today. So this is it. And I think that illustrates the idea of how you can easily structure the text and images and do this visually and do this using zoomable interface and organize it using a hierarchy or a holarchy if you want to have different structure and parallel structures. So I think sometimes we need to go to the idea of language as an area of development. And if we remember what Engelbart used to describe his framework, he said you have humans, you have technology, and technology consists of method, artifact, and language, and you use training to teach humans to use those three. And language is, I think, an overlooked part, because how we write, how we draw, how we combine writing and drawing, and Robert has some very good analysis of that in Visual Language book, because it's a spectrum. You can have photographs, you can have diagrams, you can have structured text. If we improve our understanding of how we use language for thinking and for communication, then it very logically follows what kind of tools we need to create. And it actually is not that difficult technically, especially today. I mean, maybe it was difficult when Robert was writing his mapping hypertext, or when Engelbart was creating computers, but today it can be done like in half a year if we understand the theoretical and architectural, basically, foundation that we need to build. And that's
one of the ways that I think about this, Danila. And again, this is, I'll try to describe another frontier, and that is what I have called standalone diagrams. Standalone diagrams. That is, supposing you have something on some sort of page or some sort of, like my information murals, on a very, very large page of 12 foot long and 5 foot high and hundreds of elements. But they intend for, at least for many, let's say, high school age people, they should be able to walk up and understand most of it, but it's not completely. So that's where hypertext comes in. And what is the context or the connections for a standalone diagram? Because I think this is central to the program that I've described in Future of Text, in a couple of different volumes. That is the Million Diagram Project. How do we connect? How do we conceive of and describe, and what are the rules and what are the exclusions for standalone diagrams and how they link together as documents rather than as the kind of academic document now, because that's the vision that I have for the future.
Yeah,
for at least for many of the technical, for much of the technical communication, not for necessarily for the humanities or for the storytelling or or essays or that sort of thing, but for where I've been working. That's, I think, is a real frontier that I'm happy to work with people on.
Robert, it's essentially a parallel to structured abstracts that you mentioned, because when you think about academic posters, the culture of posters have developed. But if you go back to 1970s, and when you read some of the articles that library specialists, information research specialists were writing, they were saying, we need to store posters in our libraries. We need to find a way to catalog them. And then what happened is that you can't cite a poster today because nothing in the scientific publishing world allows you to publish a PDF of your poster. You can only post it on a website, not as something which has a DOI, which makes no sense at all, because we already have all this knowledge. The million diagrams are the million scientific posters. Of course, you need to rework them slightly, but essentially that's what everybody was ignoring for the past 50 years.
Well, I'm glad to hear it's reworking them slightly. For me, it's a gigantic. I think it's a big task for a big group.
For graduate students.
I'd love to talk to you more about it.
So a couple of things. I'm going to wrap up a little bit and turn it over to Frode, who's going to say some things. First, notice we've been recording, so we will have a recording of this. And I think, Frode, you're also putting this in AI, so there's an AI summary, which is really great. So you have access to all of this. And then if Bob wants to share his slides with us,
sure, go ahead.
From the book, we'll share that as well across the group. So thank you for that. Also, I want to mention that if you're interested in a future presentation, for example, Danila, if you want to give something about this project, I'd love to have you come in the future. These presentations are meant to be these formal ways to talk about things. They're almost like symposia, but smaller. We want to keep it around 15 to 20 people so that we can actually talk, which we got to do today. So thank you for that. I also want to mention that we will be thinking about what was said today and layering that onto our project. So thank you for all that wonderful help and assistance and thinking that you provided today. And I want to thank Bob for all the work you put into this and your life's work. So thank you for that and for sharing today and being here. It's a treasure. It's a treasure that you're here.
Yes, thank you, Bob.
And then Frode?
Yeah, thank you, Dene. Also, Bob, want to thank you for your friendship and your inspiration and for being here today. Thank you very, very much. As Dene said, this will be up on our website. We're trying to do something a bit different this year. So the kind of invitation link that you've probably all seen has more information than usual. The record will also have all the AI stuff, but it'll also have a link to the video, of course, well embedded, and source and all of these things. It is to build up more of a corpus for our dialogue. And I just wanted to, next week it's going to be authoring in XR, which we'll be talking about specifically. That's a themed, not a presentation. So we hope you can make there if you want to. Bob, you mentioned at the end there, and Abhirami, you asked the question further up, which I think is so relevant to close on. Your question was, where is it? It was so beautifully worded, yeah. How would something like an extra illustrated book be manifested? That is really, really important, because linking is fine, but linking so far has been you link to something and you expect it to be viewed in a specific rectangle, because that's the way it's always been. But Brandel made an amazing mural of Bob's work. Yes. It's the simplest thing you can imagine. It's basically a rectangular JPEG in a space with nothing else, and all you can do, if you pinch, you move the entire wall. So you don't have to have sickness by using a joystick to walk. It just works so well. But how the hell do you get to it? Right? It's really, really an important question. You can send links and so on. So your question about how to embed things, one of the things that Dene and I discussed this morning was a simple thing of, if you have a link to, let's say, a 3D model of a hammer, for the sake of argument, when you open that hammer into your XR space, you can't just open an object that doesn't have a real value. The act of opening should have embedded the size of where it should be. Let's say the next link is a link to a house, and it's decided it opens room scale so it fits for you, right? Otherwise you get all this moving about. And when you're talking about opening Bob Horn's information mural, it should also have suggestions as to what that means. Should it take over the space you're in, or can it augment the space? We're trying with the authoring to have it augment your space. You can open a lot of amazing things, but they have to open knowing that they're not just going to naturally bump against a rectangle. So I thank you both for highlighting the question of, how do you put these things in? We don't know, but we have started experimenting, which is something we're so grateful for. And in this community, to try to run the experiments with you will be absolutely fantastic. And don't write things in the comments, Mark. This will go on forever. Anyway, on that note, Dene, shall we wrap?
Yeah, so next week, you want to tell them what's going on next week so they'll know? Coming next week, we have...
Yeah, it'll be, authoring in XR. Bob, if you have the opportunity to join us, that would be great. It will be really, really focused on the act of authoring. Now, one thing that is really clear in our research is that authoring involves reading, active reading, annotating, and so on. That's really important. But on Monday week, we'll probably focus more on okay, you've done the reading, you have your annotations, now what? Right? And if you have some crazy ideas, let me even go so far as if you have some stupid ideas, we would love to hear them. Right? Reasonable ideas are a dime a dozen. So if you have crazy stuff, bring it. Also, as Fabien often requests, if you want to take a pen and paper and sketch a silly thing, I mean, you can't do worse than the sketches we do ourselves, and just hold it up and say, hey, why don't we do this? That will be incredibly worthwhile.
The gigamapping people do this online with some program called Miro or something like that, where they're putting together the group thinking, and you can see it all as it's developing and as the conversation develops. Have you used that at all in this group of discussions?
No, we haven't, and it's worth looking into, but it also brings up an important other thing. Anybody who wants to have a blogging account on the Future Text Lab, you're welcome to it, even if you just use it to link to something else. The idea of our journal is to gather articles for the book for the end of the year that we can look at a little bit. So if you go sit in the park and do 10 sketches, take photographs of them, put them in, goodness gracious, that would be really great. But we haven't done any of that kind of mapping yet, Bob. No.
Once again, thank you everybody for being here today. I was going to say thank you for being here today, and please come back. and watch the schedule because there'll be other events taking place.
Well, this was a very precious day for me. I wish every author could get, a discussion of his book 37 years later.
Oh, it's so well deserved, Bob.
Thank you.
And I do want to add that in addition to the dialogue here, there is a good amount of really worthwhile people watching. Ted Nelson asked if he could have a link to the video of this recording because he wasn't able to be here today. So,
okay.
It's good to get it on the record, everything.
The book certainly was a big influence on me. I referred to it, I'm sure, in my writing, and I know I wrote about it quite a lot on Usenet back in the day.
Usenet, wow. Well, on that note, thank you all. Have a wonderful week and look forward to seeing you all soon.
Bye, Bob.
Bye.
Bye, Bob.